I want you to think about someone you know. A parent. A sibling. A friend. Someone who one morning seemed completely fine, made breakfast, answered messages, said they were tired, went to lie down, and never came back to themselves the same way again. Stroke is described as sudden. And the final event is. But in the vast majority of cases, the brain is not quiet in the days before. It is sending signals. Specific, recognizable, urgent signals that almost everyone dismisses, explains away, or simply never knew to watch for. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly what those signals look like, what is physically happening inside the brain and blood vessels when they appear, and what the window of time actually is to act before the full stroke arrives. This information exists in medical literature. Neurologists know it. But it rarely travels far enough, and people pay for that gap with their speech, their movement, and sometimes their lives. Here is the first thing you need to understand about stroke, because almost everything most people believe about it is wrong in one important way. People think stroke is an event. It is not. In most cases, stroke is an arrival. The end point of a process that has been unfolding inside the blood vessels for years, quietly, painlessly, completely below the threshold of any symptom, until one day it is not quiet anymore. A stroke happens when the brain loses its blood supply. And your brain is the most demanding organ in your body. It weighs about 1.4 kilograms, roughly 2% of your body weight. But it uses 20% of every breath you take and 25% of every unit of glucose in your blood. It never sleeps, never pauses, and it has no fuel reserves. Cut the blood supply for 4 to 6 minutes, and brain cells in that area begin dying permanently. Not sleeping. Not pausing. Dying in ways that cannot be undone. That is why stroke is called a race against time. Because every minute of delay is not an abstraction. It is tissue. Now let me explain what is happening inside the vessels long before that race begins. Because this is the part nobody teaches clearly enough. Think of the inside of your arteries as having a lining. A microscopically thin layer of cells called the endothelium, smooth as glass when healthy, letting blood flow past without friction or resistance. This lining is not just passive wallpaper. It actively manages blood flow, prevents clotting, keeps vessels flexible and responsive. But over years, from high blood sugar, from smoking, from sustained high blood pressure, from chronic inflammation, that lining gets damaged. It becomes rough, irregular. And on those rough patches, the body begins to lay down deposits. Cholesterol, platelets, inflammatory proteins. These deposits harden over time into what doctors call plaques, nodules of accumulated damage that gradually narrow the opening of the artery from the inside. Now picture a carotid artery, one of the two main vessels running up through your neck, carrying blood from your heart to your brain. A plaque has been building on the inner wall for perhaps a decade. The opening has slowly narrowed, from wide and clear to 60, 70, 80% blocked. And one day, part of that plaque breaks off. A fragment. A clot. It travels upward in the blood, reaches a smaller artery, and wedges there. If it clears on its own within a few minutes, you will have had what doctors call a transient ischemic attack, a TIA. A brief blackout in one area of the brain, followed by a return to normal. The symptom vanishes. You feel fine. You carry on. But here is what that moment actually was. It was the final warning before the real event. Research is clear on this. A TIA very often precedes a major ischemic stroke, frequently within the following 72 hours. 3 days. That is the window. The window where intervention works. The window most people waste because the warning felt small, felt brief, and then disappeared. Let me now walk you through the 5 signals your brain sends before a stroke. Not general health advice. The specific things happening in the body when each one appears, so you never mistake them for something ordinary again. The first signal is temporary blindness in one eye. You are going about your day, standing up from a chair, walking to the kitchen, and suddenly one eye goes dark. Not blurry. Dark. Like a black curtain has been drawn down over that eye, or like someone smeared the lens with gray fog. It lasts perhaps 30 seconds. Perhaps 2 minutes. Then it clears, and you can see again. You blame it on standing up too fast. Screen time. Tiredness. Here is what actually happened. A tiny fragment of plaque or a small clot broke away from the wall of your carotid artery, traveled upward, and lodged briefly in the artery that feeds the retina of that eye. The retina lost its blood supply for those seconds. The darkness you saw was not a vision problem. It was a circulation problem, in a branch of the same artery system that feeds your brain. That exact same fragment, 2 millimeters to the side, would have entered a brain artery instead of an eye artery. Instead of 30 seconds of darkness in one eye, you would be looking at permanent loss of speech, paralysis of one side of the body, or death. Neurologists have a Latin term for this, amaurosis fugax, fleeting blindness. When a patient describes this episode, it is treated as a fire alarm. Urgent evaluation begins immediately, because the risk of a full stroke in the following hours is high. This is not a visual symptom. It is a vascular emergency that happened to show itself through your eye. The second signal is sudden one-sided numbness or tingling. Not the familiar pins and needles of a limb that fell asleep. Not the gradual fading sensation from sitting in one position too long. This is different. You are sitting still or walking, or in the middle of a conversation, and one side of your body suddenly changes. The whole arm, just the hand, half the face, one complete side from head to toe. Pins and needles, or a rubbery cotton-like feeling, arriving out of nowhere with no physical explanation. The key is the word sudden and the word one-sided. Your brain maps your body in hemispheres. The left hemisphere processes sensation from the right side of your body. The right hemisphere processes the left side. When both hands go numb together, that more often points to a problem in the spine or neck. But when one side suddenly changes, only one, with no positional trigger, and then resolves after a few minutes, that is the brain talking. A specific region has briefly lost blood flow. The sensation you felt was not in your arm. It was in the brain area that represents that arm. If this has happened to you, even once, and resolved on its own, it was not nothing. It was your brain sending a very specific message about blood flow. The third signal is a sudden loss of coordination, what people describe as walking drunk without any alcohol. You are on familiar ground. A flat floor, a path you have walked 1,000 times. And suddenly your foot lands wrong. Your leg feels unsteady or rubbery. You veer sideways without meaning to. Or a violent spinning sensation arrives with no warning, not dizziness from standing up too fast, but a genuine sense that the room is moving, intense enough to make you grab the nearest surface. The part of your brain responsible for balance and smooth movement is the cerebellum, a structure at the back and base of the skull. It receives its blood supply through arteries that run up through the bones of the neck. If blood flow through those vessels drops, even briefly, the cerebellum essentially misfires. Your coordination disappears for a moment. The world tilts. People write these episodes off. Bad shoes. Tired. A bit of low blood pressure. And many of those explanations are correct. The distinction that matters is this: dizziness with a clear trigger, rolling over in bed, moving the head quickly, a known inner ear condition, is usually benign. But spontaneous, intense dizziness combined with any difficulty walking straight should always be evaluated for a vascular cause. Not reassured. Evaluated. The fourth signal is in your speech, and it is not forgetting a word. Forgetting words happens to everyone. It happens more when you are tired, or stressed, or have had a difficult week. That is not what I am describing here. What I am describing is speech that suddenly fails in a way that feels profoundly wrong even to you. You know what you want to say. Your thoughts are clear. But the words come out slurred, broken, cut off, as if the pathway from thought to voice has been severed. Or the opposite. You speak fluently, but what comes out is meaningless. Words that do not connect, sentences that are not sentences, and you may not even realize they are wrong in the moment. These correspond to two specific speech regions in the brain. The first governs the production of words, the instructions to the tongue, lips, and jaw. When it loses blood flow, the words get stuck or come out wrong. The second governs comprehension and language organization. When it is affected, speech becomes fluent but incoherent. Either form, appearing suddenly and resolving within minutes, is a classic presentation of a transient ischemic attack. Not fatigue. Not stress. A warning from a specific, identifiable region of your brain. If your speech broke down for 3 minutes and then recovered, that is not reassuring. That is the alarm going off. The fact that it silenced itself does not mean the alarm was false. The fifth signal is one most people never connect to stroke at all. Vitiligo combined with new, unusually strong headaches. Vitiligo is a skin condition, patches of pale or completely white skin where pigment-producing cells have stopped working. What most people do not realize is that vitiligo is an autoimmune process. The immune system has begun attacking its own cells, mistaking the pigment-producing cells for something foreign. When the immune system goes off target like that, it rarely confines itself to one area. In many people with vitiligo, the same autoimmune inflammation also affects the endothelium, that inner lining of the blood vessels we talked about earlier. Inflamed endothelium becomes rough and damaged endothelium is where plaques form. Vitiligo alone does not mean stroke is coming. Many people with vitiligo live without any vascular problems. But if you have vitiligo and you begin developing headaches that are new, different in character from any headaches you have had before, more intense, more frequent, that combination deserves a proper vascular evaluation. Not a wait-and-see approach. A real conversation with your doctor about what your blood vessels look like. What do you do if you recognize any of these signals, even something that happened months ago and resolved completely? You have a window. Research in stroke medicine shows that the risk of a full stroke is highest in the 72 hours following a transient ischemic attack. 3 days. Not 3 weeks. Not 3 months. 3 days from when the warning occurred. That window is not a reason to panic. It is a reason to act. The first thing is not to be alone. Tell someone close to you what happened. Make sure someone can reach you. If a second, more serious episode occurs and you suddenly cannot speak or move, you will need another person present. Someone who can call emergency services and get help quickly. This is not an overreaction. This is how the 72-hour window gets used well. Do not drive yourself to evaluation. Losing vision or arm control for even a few seconds at highway speed is life-threatening, for you and for everyone around you. Plan ahead. There are 3 specific evaluations worth asking your doctor about if you have had any of these warning signs. The first is a carotid duplex ultrasound. This looks at both the structure of the neck arteries and how blood is actually flowing through them, including whether the flow speeds up and becomes turbulent at a narrowed segment. If the carotid artery is narrowed by more than 70% by plaque, that is considered hemodynamically significant. The question is no longer whether a stroke will happen, it is when. That is when the conversation about intervention begins. The second is a test called glycated hemoglobin, HbA1c. This single blood test reflects your average blood sugar over the past 3 months, not just a snapshot from one morning. You cannot prepare for it with one careful week of eating. It catches the gray zone called prediabetes, where blood sugar has been elevated long enough to be damaging vessel walls, but nobody has formally told you that you have diabetes yet. Prediabetes is one of the most under-recognized drivers of vascular damage in people over 60. The third is Holter monitoring, a 24-hour heart rhythm recording worn during your normal day. The reason is that some of the most dangerous heart rhythm problems come and go. Atrial fibrillation, where the upper chambers of the heart quiver instead of beating, causes blood to pool and clot inside the heart. Those clots travel to the brain. It is one of the most common and most severe causes of stroke. And it often produces no symptoms at all, or symptoms so mild they are blamed on caffeine or a stressful day. A 24-hour recording catches what a 10-second clinic ECG cannot. Stroke is not a bolt from a clear sky. In most cases, it is the predictable end of a long process, and that process announces itself. You now know what those announcements look like. Brief blindness in one eye. Sudden one-sided numbness. An unexplained loss of coordination. Speech that breaks down and then recovers. Vitiligo combined with new and unusual headaches. Any of these, even if they vanished in a minute, is a reason to write it down, bring it to your doctor, and ask specifically about TIA evaluation, carotid ultrasound, HbA1c, and Holter monitoring. The people who survive strokes intact are almost always the people who took the warning seriously. Not the people who waited to see if it would happen again. Your brain gave you information. The most useful thing you can do now is use it. Leave your age in the comments below. I want to know who is watching this, and if someone you love has ever described even one of these warning signs and dismissed it, please share this video with them. You may give them the 72 hours that changes everything. I will see you in the next one.